it's good to see that good old-fashioned clickbait still works. I want to learn about bat caves and the animals that live in them today. Many caves are cold and damp and often lie below ground. The animals that live there have to cope with complete darkness. No, I'm just kidding. We're taking a look into the Dark Knight Trilogy tonight. So I was hoping I could incept you a little bit there at the beginning, given that this is Christopher Nolan's trilogy. I'm a amateur lover of, obviously, stories, but film too. I don't know anything about it, but I love watching those YouTube channels like Stories of Old and Every Frame a Painting, and there's many more that just aren't coming to me right now. But just like these phrases, Christopher Nolan himself devoted himself to an ideal, then you become... I didn't time that right. A legend, Mr. Nolan. And I think all three movies were impeccable. They were fun to watch. I think the realism is what really raptured me. I loved Batman Begins because it was a great traditional hero story. And I'm a big fan of martial arts, so I loved how they incorporated Eastern, some philosophies and martial arts in that. We have all three, what do you call them? Just like movie poster logos, I guess. Yeah, as you can see, this book is really thick. So no doubt we're gonna miss some gems. But for the most part, I just want to scroll through it and see what kind of interesting insights and behind the scenes and maybe philosophies and, I don't know, see what we can find out, you know? The spirit of exploration. We're just gonna try to tackle the whole book. It's broken into pre-production, production, post-production. So, yeah, it's cool to be able to look at and consider what it took to make a movie this complex. Not just the material, $1 million sets in these gigantic, really surreal sets. I mean, from the football stadium to the underground lairs, to the spectacle of these real-life downtown scenes shot in Pittsburgh and LA. I love, there's a real art that really is, that goes into the character development, the screenplay, and, having Nolan and these other guys having thought out, who these characters are, writing actual people, and making them believable as well. They have background stories, real lives. They go through real trauma. So yeah, I guess I'm just amazed at the level of competence and skill of the actors, and of course Christopher Nolan. Michael Caine has a little introductory paragraph here, or page. He says, to point out the versatility of Nolan's talent, look at the opening sequence, the action sequence, when the buses and the bank heist robbery, and with Joker. And then also watch the opening and ending speeches by Heath Ledger that won him an Oscar, a posthumous Oscar. And it takes a really talented guy to be able to have an action yet thoughtful script and see it through to the end. And it's also cool, him as a person, he works with his wife, Emma Thomas, who Caine wittily, I guess, remarks that she's the producer of these trilogies and of his 4 children. So David S. Goyer was a producer, I think, as well. That little bit, I guess he went into a comic book shop in Los Angeles, and the owner started grilling him because he was kind of a local, and started recognizing that he was picking up a lot more Batman books than usual. And so the guy had to lie when he asked him if he was writing a new script in the early 2000s. He had to say no. Because I guess Nolan, from what I read, just glancing at this, is very, very protective of his intellectual property. So you can't blame him. I mean, I think it was a brilliant script, and it would have been a shame to see it get leaked. Oh my God, this is not your father's Batman film. He says he knew Batman's story was bigger than could be fit in a single film, but we never really sat down specifically to plot out a trilogy. But we did have a notion. Let me get that out of the way. Of what shape of Bruce Wayne's story would be were we to make 3 films. Even from the first one. Just to come up with the first film, we had to have some idea of what Bruce Wayne's life story could be. He'd always had an aversion to what he calls sequel bait. There was considerable risk in what Nolan was doing, because he had... Oh man, that's bright. There we go, it's better. We had Tim Burton doing the original Batman live-action movies in the 80s and 90s, and then the Batman and Robin, Mr. Ice with Arnold Schwarzenegger, was produced or directed by Joel Schumacher, who made it much more of a, very, very simplistic, unrealistic, very caricatured, very cartoonish, that George Clooney and Chris something, whatever his name was, who played Robin. definitely took it into a darker, more realistic, more gritty, deep, more character-rich direction. And I love, like I said, I love the talking about filmmaking, and my lighting is terrible here. Sorry, guys. But yeah, I watch all these film analysis channels on YouTube all the time. I really love them. Like, for me, it's interesting to watch these film school students, I guess, to hear their insight. I guess it's maybe part of the appeal of why, if I explain a math problem or a physics problem to someone who's never really taken physics, if I do a good job, it makes it interesting because you don't have to do any of the legwork. You just get to see the result of a year or a semester of learning something, and you get to consume it passively and learn a lot of tricks and interesting tools, interesting ideas that we use as tools in the craft of whatever it is. Maybe it's math and physics in my realm, or filmmaking here. And I love the insight that this whole trilogy really, it wasn't the original, but it you might think of Blade or The Matrix certainly came before this, but certainly this one took the mainstream superhero like Batman and set the trend, set the pace for the antecedent Superman and Ben Affleck Batman films, which I honestly really didn't see. I like the first Man of Steel, but I didn't really watch any of the others after that. The image of an orphaned Bruce Wayne standing alone at a window of Wayne Manor filled a gap in the Batman mythology for Nolan and Goyer. And here's 3-year-old John F. Kennedy Jr. saluting his father's casket, informed Nolan's characterization of the young Bruce Wayne. He called him the loneliest boy in the world. So that was a good example of why this movie is so realistic, because Nolan's a great character writer from, what I understand, my little amateurish take on it. And I love how there's, what is it, Comics Explained, I think. Since Marvel began getting really big, there's also a lot of YouTube channels out there that informed me about the real depth and sophistication of comic books that I never realized existed. But yeah, comic books they are a source of great art that I really hadn't considered before. I was never really a huge aficionado as a kid. I only got handed down a few old comic books, and I consumed them, enjoyed them, but never really pursued it beyond that. This, the new revival, Batman in the Marvel Universe, it's eye-opening to realize. In Watchmen, I was a huge fan of that movie. It's impressive just how sophisticated comic books can be. And then Nolan goes even deeper, and I guessed in the traditional canon they were going to see when Bruce watches his parents get murdered after a stick-up. They're going to see The Mask of Zorro. But Nolan elevated it to the next level, or at least added a layer of sophistication to it by having them go see a play called Mephistopheles, which Mephistopheles is the antagonist. He's basically the devil in Goethe's 1700s novel called Faust, in which Dr. Faust is a brilliant intellectual who makes a deal with the devil for his soul. And in that play, there are a lot of, he said it was an opera house. It was an opera, I guess he was seeing, with a lot of dramatic bats and shadowy figures, which, of course, left an imprint on Bruce Wayne's psyche. Yeah, so they went back and tapped into a lot of the rich, deep literature of Batman. Frank Miller's darkly toned Batman Year One, right here. And here's just a very typically dark portrayal of Batman. Dark yet, it's a gritty yet noble portrayal of him as the overseer, the watcher, the protector of a grimy cityscape in the background there. So Goyer wanted to feature a Batman villain that had yet to have been portrayed in the films. They already had Jack Nicholson. I always forget who's the actor and who's the golfer, but Jack Nicholson as Two-Face. Jim Carrey as not the Joker, but the Riddler. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnie as Mr. Ice. So we went with the Scarecrow. The alter ego of Arkham Asylum Administrator Dr. Jonathan Crane. It says Nolan was intrigued by the character, but a little bit put off by his mask. Until a logical reason for it could be written in the script, which was that he used it as a psychosis inducing event, I guess, so he could scare people into submission. Kind of like brainwashing in a way. You gaslight them into believing that their own reality has faded away. And then the end of Batman Begins, the first movie, they had the Joker, not a reveal, but a suggestion. And it was cool. I actually forgot about this because it's been a while since I've seen it. But here on the asphalt, you have a dirty old, almost antique Joker card with a little bit of green in the corner. And it said that the studio didn't even realize they were, he was gonna drop the Joker card, but the executive at Warner Brothers said it's difficult to get Christopher Nolan, Chris, to talk about anything while he's on set, in the process, in the midst of production. He's completely in his own world, in the world that he's created. So the Joker card at the end of Batman Begins was frankly a surprise to him. It was very elegant and a delicate moment that allowed a sequel, but didn't guarantee one. I like that. So it was certainly a suggestion of where it could go. DC Comics first introduced the Joker in Batman #1, 1940. Shown here is page 33 of The Killing Joke, written by Alan Moore in 1988. Of course, we got Two-Face over here. Yeah. So this is, this is all the precedent, the groundwork out of which, the fertile soil, the fertile background of rich backstory that Nolan was able to grab out of. So here's Bane. They said he's a lesser known anti-hero than the Riddler or the Penguin, but the perfect archetype for the severity and extremity of the world-destroying plot of the third movie in the trilogy. Yeah, it says going for it meant conceiving action sequences that would be exponentially larger in scale and would consume considerably more screen time than those in the first two movies. And they said it wasn't action for the sake of masturbatory effects like you see in the Transformers movies, where it's just really explosions for the sake of the spectacle. These grew out organically, grew out of the story, which I can really appreciate. It was the third movie was definitely my least favorite, so I'd much rather be taken back by a plot twist or a in-depth character, an emotion, a realistic portrayal of a trauma in a dialogue than portraying it through explosions and car chases. So But he was trying to appeal to a broad audience, and by this, the fame and popularity of The Dark Knight, he certainly had a lot to, to live up to in terms of being consumed, to being appealing to a broad audience. And here we got a drawing of the underground lair that was kind of Bane's domicile under Gotham City. And then Batwoman, or Catwoman, sorry. So now we're into production design, into the meat of the book. What Nolan wanted first and foremost was a scale model of the Batmobile. And I was personally really, really impressed with the Batmobile. It looked, it looked very militaristic, futuristic, stealthy, sleek for its size. Overall, it just portrayed a sense of sheer might and power, yet technology that Batman's known for. So it said, because Batman wanted a real car out on the streets rather than a computer-generated one, as realized in the previous Batman movies, the special effects team, working with a crew of custom car builders, had to translate the tumbler Batmobile design into a practical vehicle. Shown here, top. And up here we got the skeletal chassis, the framework for it. It's awesome that it was a realistic and actually drivable car. Even familiar images as the script and process evolved of Batman looking over Gotham began to transform into something fresh, they say. Yeah, I guess, in hindsight, I'm reliving the experience, specifically of Batman Begins, because I remember the underground, gritty part of the city when Bruce, before he was Batman, was riding with Rachel and went out to go shoot, or maybe he was by himself, but went out to kill the main mobster guy. And that was just such a real, I didn't feel like you were watching a superhero movie at all. You felt like it was like a gangster movie, and it was very gripping. This is from Wayne Enterprises boardroom right there. Yeah, and the Batcave man with a running waterfall in the stream. So these were cardigan sheds. And they say sheds, but they're really airplane hangars the size of a football field. 16 stories of fly space. God. So 160 foot tall airplane hangars. That's so amazing. It pays off. That's why these movies are really so great. An Icelandic glacier stood in for the Himalayas, where Bruce Wayne's journey to becoming Batman begins. Nice little play on the title there. This is Wayne Manor was played by Metmore Towers. Built by the Rothschilds in the 1850s, Metmore Towers served as both interior and exterior Wayne Manor. Very interesting connection there. Maybe I'll do a history of the rise of the international banking system after this. There's this motorcycle. That thing was, everything they did was top notch. I loved it. In this underground lair, with these lights, let's see if we can learn about it here. And yeah, look, it says here, just a testament to Nolan's storytelling ability. He reveres the archetypal heroic journey, and he respects it, and it pays off, because Batman Begins is a beautiful, beautiful example of that. To depict the epic hero's journey aspects of the first film, Nolan and Crowley had set much of Batman Begins in a natural, scenic setting. The film had featured slow pans across splendid Himalayas, pullbacks on the lush gardens, trees, and rolling lawns of Wayne Manor, and wide shots of natural, not man-made, caverns beneath the manor's foundation, alive with rushing streams and waterfalls. In contrast, the Dark Knight's storyline suggested to the filmmakers was a much more architectural, industrial, modernist aesthetic. We had this chaotic Joker character who was trying to destroy the city that Batman had cleaned up and put in order, explained Crowley. To portray that orderly Gotham, we wanted it to have hard lines and clean streets. We started asking, what if Gotham City Hall was like a modernist Mies van der Rohe building? And we continued in that direction, deciding that we would create this very structured, ordered environment, and then the Joker would introduce anarchy into it. And that's exactly what these scenes, these settings, these sets, I guess, portray. With his underground bunker where he was in downtown Gotham, he could park his tumbler while Wayne Manor was being rebuilt. And I love how the entire ceiling is nothing but lights. It's such a futuristic, tangible, palpable setting. It doesn't feel like you're in a movie set there at all. It's very realistic. Here's a panoramic of Gotham City. And then you have the Bat. And here's a brilliant example of why I wanted to show you guys this book. Here's the stepwells. This is the set for Bane's underground lair. It's cool that they had, it's the it's the prison. The 500-foot deep prison. When Chris first mentioned that he wanted an underground prison, I asked him if he'd ever seen Indian stepwells, which are these crazy geometric shapes, geometric steps leading down to the water that ancient cultures in India built. Originally we thought maybe we could shoot that, but then it became too much. They're in Rajasthan, India. But they decided it would have been too labor intensive to build the infrastructure to be able to set up an entire recording cavalry, or whatever the word might be, crew. But it's, again, that's what grounds it to reality and makes it so realistic and not like a fantasy film. It's because they use real ancient locations. They use real natural settings. A little bit of trivia that to me was interesting was that Nolan was so secretive about his scripts that he gave them aliases, which I guess isn't that unique to him. I'm sure the Avengers Endgame had an alias, but he called it, what do you call though originally entitled The Intimidation Game as its alias, the code title for Batman Begins was changed to Flora's Wedding. and while Rory's First Kiss stood in for The Dark Knight. That's pretty funny. Here's Nolan in the Batcave right here. I like this quote. I'm pretty sure it's from Christian Bale. It sounds like something he would say. At the end of the day, Bruce Wayne's just a guy who does a lot of push-ups. It's pretty funny. So I guess Nolan actually had his eye on Christian Bale right away. And I don't know how many of you guys would have seen the movie The Machinist, but it was 2003 or 4 came out, I guess. And Christian Bale plays this insomniac guy who's a factory worker who starts having hallucinations because he doesn't sleep and he doesn't really eat, and so he gets super thin. And Christian Bale actually lost a lot of weight for that movie. And it says that he put on 75 pounds. Hold on, let me get the numbers right. Oh no, I'm sorry. So, God, and Bale was 30 years old when he was playing this. That makes me feel like a piece of trash in the Gotham City slums, man. So, 30-year-old actor Bale was extremely thin, having lost nearly 70 pounds for his role in The Machinist as Trevor Resnick. But Bale assured the director that he could regain the weight in time for the screen test 8 weeks later. And so he'd regained over 70 pounds in like 8 weeks, 2 months. That's phenomenal. That's nuts. And this actually gives a lot of insight into the manifestation of the Batman we know in the final product of all the movies. There's a dialogue between Bale and Nolan, and it says, in addition to packing on weight, Bale had prepared for the screen test by engaging Nolan in a number of in-depth conversations about his take on the character and the story. Quote, I picked his brains as much as he would let me, recalled Bale, and found out as much as I could so I could be confident going into the screen test where he has to act in front of people in like a room, which has got to be the most awkward thing. I said to Chris I don't want to waste time here. If we're going to do a screen test, I don't want to guess. I had to know if we're on the same wavelength. As clear as Nolan's vision for the character as he could be, as clear on that vision as he could be without giving access to the script. Bale gave the screen test all he had, wondering as he did so if he was giving it too much. I really went for it, he said. I knew it might be a little more extreme than they would like, that they might look at me and think, what the hell is he doing? There's no way he's going to be in our big budget movie doing that. But that had been a feral, frightening, almost freakish take on Batman. An interpretation that had Bale speaking in an animalistic growl, and was precisely what Nolan wanted. When Christian was playing Batman, Nolan recalled of the performance, he communicated a lot of intensity through his eyes and mouth. He was also very controlled and specific in how he portrayed the aggression of this character, the animal-like quality. He talked a lot about Batman crouching in the shadows or on rails or by the sides of buildings, very much the way he does in the comics. Then when he was playing Bruce, he had the same intensity, a fire in the eyes that made you believe that this was an ordinary man who could make himself extraordinary. Simply through self-discipline, because, and this is our quote, I thought it was Bale saying it, but I guess it's Nolan. At the end of the day, Bruce Wayne is just a guy who does a lot of push-ups. And it looked like the start of a very obviously fruitful relationship, but it said that Nolan expressed the expectation that Bale would have to gain a lot of weight, gain a lot of muscle, obviously, to fill the suit. And unfortunately, Bale did gain the weight, but not the muscle. And they said with characteristic self-discipline, though, the crew said, bloody hell, Chris, what are we doing here? Batman or Fat Man? But the characteristic self-discipline, which I really admire in Bale, I mean, to be able to drop weight, gain it, really mold his whole body for a role, beyond the body, the demeanor, personality, his acting, obviously. You could tell he lets the role consume him, and that's super, I don't know, it's just very impressive that you can immerse yourself in a role, because it's extremely believable. I really liked him as Batman. Bale transformed his physique through an aggressive training and diet regime, which, by the way, he maintained throughout the whole shoot. Didn't really start eating until he knew he wouldn't have to take his shirt off again. And here we have Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman as Alfred and Lucius Fox. He said he took his cue from the 1978 Superman, surrounding Bale with high-caliber actors. Wow, I didn't know these people were in... Jesus. Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, Ned Beatty, and Glenn Ford. All these great actors around Christopher Reeve. I felt that Batman deserved similarly epic treatment. Wow, that's awesome. wow, this is some... listen to this insight from Michael Caine playing Alfred. Alfred's good at that kind of thing. He's the human touch amongst all this, and Bruce Wayne keeps going back to him to see if he's done wrong this time. I think Alfred understands that if Batman turned dishonest, he would be a terrible villain. He'd be worse than the Joker. Instead, by the time Michael Caine had returned to The Dark Knight Rises, he'd been in, what was it, Inception? What was the other movie? I know he was in Interstellar. I don't know if that was before or after The Dark Knight Rises. They referred to him as their lucky charm. But he said it's actually the opposite. Very cool. I mean, it's like great art. It's like being, I love these behind the scenes because truly great film, music, paintings, architecture, whatever it is the, it's the mind child, the creation of one or a handful of truly great people, That's why it's always compelling for me to find out more about who they are, how they act in real life, with amongst other people, and to really get a well-rounded grasp of their true character. Some people are bad, but you can still enjoy their art. But it's informative. It's an educational exercise, certainly for me to learn about these great people. It says that Michael Caine said about Christopher Nolan, he's quiet on the set. He'll just come up to you very quietly to make a suggestion. The sign of a great director, and this happens with Chris, is that when he makes a suggestion, you go, why didn't I think of that? And he's also right there on the front lines, too. He says a lot of directors probably go in a back room and watch what's going on through a monitor. But he said Christopher Nolan's right there, right behind the camera. And then Gary Oldman, of course. Very cool. Katie Holmes and Maggie Gyllenhaal is Rachel Dawes. And of course Liam Neeson. God, I forgot how many brilliant actors are in here. And the other guy from Inception, Cillian Murphy. Who's this guy? Ken Watanabe. Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent / Two-Face. And then, of course, Heath Ledger. And Bane. Anne Hathaway, Marion Cotillard, Cotillard. That can't be how you pronounce her name. Sorry, Marion. And of course, Joseph Gordon-Levitt as the future Robin. And here we have Christopher Nolan directing each actor. And so now we move on to the actual costume design. I remember one famous point was that it didn't have nipples, like the past George Clooney version did. They just wanted to make it, again, more realistic. And I appreciate so much that they didn't use computer-generated imagery, CGI. For me, that takes away so much. I'd rather see someone look a little bit less believable. Well, you can't say that, because as soon as something goes CGI, like the, I forget his name, the Sith guy who Kylo Ren cuts in half, that guy should have been an actor in makeup, I think, even though it was really well done. Who else was? Oh yeah, the famous, the white, what do you call him? The evil elf from the Hobbit movies. That guy should not have been CGI. The one with the metal prosthetic sword coming out of his arm. I just think it looks, I don't know. It just almost takes you out of the movie. At least with a real person, you could believe that. I don't know. You at least associate it with a real individual. When it's computer generated, it's just like another layer of I don't know, just falsity. I just don't like that. And so, you can see it's labeled The Intimidation Game right there. These are mock-ups of the first bat suit. And it says here that it took 14 separate pieces that Christian Bale had to wear to put on the suit every time he appeared on film in the bat suit. And the Dark Knight suit called for the molding and casting of more than 100 individual sections. Compared to the simpler silicone, the Dark Knight's suit called for the molding and casting of more than 100 individual pieces, compared to the simple silicone and neoprene batsuit from the original film, or the first film. I remember this too, along with the nipples. The neck wasn't malleable, so Christian Bale had to turn his whole body every time he wanted to turn and look to the side. He called it the bat turn. And we got the Scarecrow and Ra's al Ghul. I think all the costumes were amazing. So amazing. Attention to detail was crucial, including something as simple as the sleeve length and button placement on Jonathan Crane, or Scarecrow's, suit. Took 20 iterations to arrive at that design. I always forget that Liam Neeson, he is in so many different roles. He's almost like a Samuel L. Jackson. He was in The Phantom Menace, and so the lady, given that Ra's al Ghul was very much influenced by Eastern spiritualism, the costume designer wanted to make sure she didn't tap too closely into the monastic influence that would, wanted to suggest a monastic influence without too closely resembling the monkish appearance of Qui-Gon Jinn from the Jedi Master that he played in Phantom Menace only a few years earlier. And here's Heath Ledger in his makeup. That's pretty damn good makeup. Right there. And for the costume design, it said, to find a common language for defining the Joker, Nolan turned to Francis Bacon's study after Velasquez's portrait of Pope Innocent X as a reference point. It's a pretty frightening painting, actually, if you look at that. Wow. It's like a pope being Thanos. Wow. And then down here, again, another testament to the realism of the general aesthetic of the film. They actually wanted Joker to be a trendy guy, trendy young gentleman. Bane's face mask. That's pretty cool. Okay, here you can see variations of Bane's face mask here. There's 9 alterations. Huh. So I wonder if these black lines mean they're actually going to put... Well, I guess that just means the straps, yeah. And that's what it ultimately looked like. Said he had some problems with claustrophobia initially when Tom Hardy did, when initially wearing the mask, but towards the end he just wore it all the time. He became quite attached to it, I guess. Sort of helped him to act. Felt like he was adopting a new persona, like you would in Halloween. In the Catwoman suit, designed stealthily to sell the sexiness of Anne Hathaway's body without actually revealing it. You can see the texture Looks almost reptilian. And then these are all the rescue workers and the football outfits. Wow, look at that. God, that shot. Let me brighten it up a little bit. Yeah, the shooting in the real landscape is what really drew me to Batman Begins. They weren't, for sure, and they didn't look like they were on movie sets for the most part when he had to train in Nepal. It's so awesome, and he's really really out there on the edge of that cliff. Again, another interesting insight into the filmmaking process. Christopher Nolan says he didn't want to have two separate crews, him manning the primary crew of dialogue and the main actors, and a secondary crew simultaneously filming the action sequences that required only, stunt doubles and no dialogue, I guess. So Nolan wanted to be in control and behind the camera for all of them. So it took about half a year, over 4 months of filming, which says it's unusually long even for a large budget movie, which I didn't realize. I thought they usually take that long to film. And I love this quote by Liam Neeson here. They were actually filming a fight sequence on ice, on an actual glacier. Liam Neeson says, it was quite amazing. I'd never seen a glacier, let alone up close before, and to film at the foot of this glacier that was moving about a meter every week was remarkable. A remarkable way to jump in. It was the first first scene, I guess, that they had filmed. Every so often between setups, we'd see ice crumbling at the head of the glacier, reminding us all that this was a big, living force moving towards us. It was beautifully dangerous and strange. It was beautifully dangerous and strange to be in a section of the world where there wasn't a tree or a bird anywhere. It was like a gorgeous Beckett wasteland. Local experts warned that the ice was rapidly thinning. In fact, they told us that the lake could be melted the next day after shooting for a weekend. So we made the decision to jump right into filming. That's pretty awesome. Let's brighten this up. And the monastery set was built at Shepperton Studios in London. With walls of simulated rock and stone, in the visible foundations of Wayne Manor, the cathedral-like Batcave set was constructed in the largest soundstage at Shepperton in London. Yeah, that was phenomenal. Well, they used a 50-foot telecrane. Tele meaning extendable. Or the word tele means from a distance. So, telephone, telemetry, telegraph, telescope. Stuntman in this was filmed in Iceland. And there's the monorail scene. And again, really Bruce Wayne as himself, and taking the hero's journey as a broken young adolescent, and then just wandering off to find himself and put himself willingly in the most, threatening positions, is what made his transformation into Batman, for me, the most satisfying. If it was just kind of glossed over, I don't think I would have nearly have been as invested as I was when he willingly chose to become Batman at the end. It was awesome to see him as Bruce fighting, before he was Batman, how he was trained in the martial arts to be a warrior. Very cool. In these scenes, so realistic. Nice. That's an awesome shot. And that was the Jewelers Building in Chicago, I guess. Three weeks of the Chicago shoot was dedicated to the Tumblr's race through the streets. A 5-minute sequence. That was amazing. I mean, yeah, look at these action shots. The cars flipping. Yeah, that was amazing. And here we go in Chapter 6, The Shoot. That's really cool. They actually shot the opening sequence of Heath Ledger's Joker bank heist so that they could leak it, put it out as promotional material for the movie well before anything else was actually shot. Yeah, something I wouldn't have noticed is that the aesthetic of The Dark Knight was meant to look really clean, and you notice it says here in the first few minutes, of the film, The Dark Knight declared its departure from the darker Gotham of Batman Begins through the architecture and lighting, the bright, clean streets, bright daylit, no steam, no dirt. The buildings are even, a brighter color. They're not dark and dingy. So here, Nolan confers with Ledger during the shoot. Didn't want to pass that up because the legend Ledger. At the historic Farmlow building in London, Heath Ledger and Christian Bale gear up for the scene in which Batman interrogates the Joker. The site was used for Gotham City Police Station interiors throughout the trilogy. Wow, look at that. That's amazing that's well, I don't want to speak too soon. It looks like a real boardroom. The highly reflective 80-foot table, 80-foot glass table, provided filmmakers with a striking graphic image for the Wayne Enterprise boardroom set. Nice. And the 13th floor, 13th floor of the IBM building, a Chicago skyscraper designed by the architect Mies van der Rohe. And this down here was the drastic transformation. This was the boardroom from Batman Begins. So it certainly makes it modernized and expanded. Nice. It says Lake Michigan doubled as the Caribbean for a scene in which Bruce Wayne dives off his yacht to board a seaplane. The one when he was going to Hong Kong. While the final stages of the semi-truck flip, executed as a practical, meaning real, non-CGI effect, all in one gag at LaSalle Street. Jacksonville has a LaSalle Street too. Now look at this. I just happened to read the caption to this one before filming. And this, he might have been strapped in here, but I don't know if he was. This is actually Christian Bale leaning over, I think if not one of the tallest buildings in Hong Kong. Okay, so it was the Sears Tower. Is that in Seattle? He says Christian likes to challenge himself physically. It made a beautiful shot for us, him standing there on the ledge when we drove a helicopter at him very fast to get that image. I guess nowadays they would use a drone, which is pretty wild to think we're now probably beyond helicopters for scenes like this. They're noisy and they make a lot of thrust with the wind, so that, no doubt, I don't know if I would do that. One strong gust, and if you're not strapped in, you're gonna become part of the pavement pretty soon. And then here I wanted to go back, really, because the Heath Ledger Joker scene when he's walking out of the exploding building, that to me was an astounding special effects, or practical effects, I guess you'd say. Said Heath. What did it say? Yeah, Bale. I said Bale forewent, because he was in the Bat outfit. It could have been someone else, his stunt double. And you can see right there, that's his stunt double. But it said that Bale actually wanted to go out and step on the edge of the Sears Tower. So Heath Ledger showed similar nerve at the end of August when filmmakers shot the explosion that brings down Gotham General Hospital. Rather than create the effect through miniatures or computer graphics, Nolan, true to character, had insisted on shooting a real building collapse, and had set his crew to finding a building that was slated for demolition. After much effort, location managers found the soon-to-be-destroyed Brock's Candy Factory. And Chris Corbell's crew worked with demolition experts to bring it down. For Corbell, the anxiety of collapsing the building as cameras rolled had been ratcheted up by its proximity to a Union Pacific and Metra commuter rail line. Freight service and transit schedules afforded the filmmakers only a 2-hour window in which to execute the demolition. Wow. They said they were within 5 minutes of blowing the whole thing, of ruining the whole shot because of being behind schedule. Hospital demolition made for an unusually big day on a set that was known for its big days. And most of the crew, there's Bale again, gathered around to witness the event. It was quite a rush, recalled Smith. Heath walked out of the building and then the whole thing collapsed on itself in the most spectacular fashion. Heath never even looked back, which is just incredible. It was all timed out by the special effects guys, and they had a load of fail-safe mechanisms, but still, if someone asked me to walk out of that thing, I'm not sure I'd do it, he said. Wow. The explosion was so powerful that even standing 1,500 feet away, 500 yards, they still felt the heat of the blast. They said the temperature must have risen 20 degrees for a few seconds, and then they felt the actual shock wave. there's CGI, which I definitely wasn't, I don't know why. I mean, clearly it would have taken a lot of time, effort, makeup to put that on, but I really wasn't very impressed with the CGI. I don't know. I feel like he would need a lot of eye drops. The costume designer, wanting to avoid a possibly illogical and separate two-faced costume, incorporated a red lining into Harvey Dent's gray suit, classic gray suit, to dramatize the character's descent into madness. Oh, this is the one I read. As he had with the Sears Tower, Christian Bale had insisted upon standing on the ledge of Hong Kong's tallest building, IFC 2. God, I personally wouldn't do that. I went to the Toronto's, what is that called? Is that the Sears Tower? I don't think so. But yeah, we walked on this glass, underneath which is I think 1,000-foot drop. Just you and a couple inches of glass. And 1,000 feet below, you could see the little tiny people. You can't even hardly make out what they're wearing. It was frightening. I did it once for a picture, and that was it. I'm deathly afraid of heights. Everyone said to us, "You're going to Pittsburgh in August? What are you thinking?" Here they are at the Indian-Pakistani border in a city called Rajasthan. And a beautiful temple in the background. Oh, and this was the hangar. Look at that thing, it's really tall. And then they had the, I guess, pretty much Bain's sewage system headquarters under there. If you look at the, just the sheer scale, they have, it's gotta be hundreds of gallons of water flowing right there. Very cool. And that fuselage scene was pretty amazing as well. And this set right here, give you guys a close up. And these are the Indian well replicas. Ancient Indian well replicas. And I love how when they made the replica, they put in safety rails. Or I guess I love that in India they don't have safety rails. It's awesome. So yeah, that's just impressive set design. Ridiculously involved. I mean, even the watermarks, the staining on this, so impressive. It's awesome. Here we have the football scene from Dark Knight Rises. And it looks like they actually, what I read, they took over the whole stadium, filled it with extras. They had a real Pittsburgh Steelers football player. What's his name? Hines Ward, I guess. And they had stunt doubles actually fall through the holes that they planted. It's awesome. So everything else was CGI, I guess, but they built a raised platform right here that they filmed on and filled the rest, the actual sod of the football field. They left it alone. Here's how the Batmobile, or whatever they called it, the flying bat, was done. You just had it sitting on top of a car, driving through downtown Pittsburgh. And here's Cillian Murphy. The Peaky Blinder himself, reprising his role as Scarecrow. An adjudicator of guilt in the anarchistic aftermath of Bane's plot to destroy Gotham. And then here's a guy with their mapped out chase sequence with toy cars there. And there's Christian Bale and Mr. Tom Hardy. Quote, what are we on? Chapter 8, Special Effects and Stunts. Quote, let's do it for real. Yeah, this is pretty phenomenal right here. This semi-truck flipping. Said this was the crowning achievement of the special effects team's work on the Dark Knight Trilogy. Nolan had been determined to shoot the unprecedented truck flip from the moment he'd first conceived it. So he said that, like all good visionaries, he had to persuade the special effects team that it was a good idea to do it. And he said, alright, well, if we'll test it once, do a preliminary test, and if it gets anywhere near flipping over, we'll go ahead with it. And they said they installed a piston on the back that would spring up. And they said right away, we did the run, pressed the button, and it just sailed over. They said, my God, I can't believe it's done that. So they had to, the only problem is if it deviated even like 10 degrees, it would have flipped right through a storefront on the street they were filming in. And here's all these choreographed fights. It is always fun to watch. In a really, really big choreographed fight, it's kind of, it's all or nothing, because if you go back and you're really trying to, split hairs and nitpick, you can always see some extras in the background fighting and really, really not selling it. It's pretty funny. I'm not sure if this movie, these trilogies had that, but I've definitely seen it before. And here's Batman Begins fighting. And here we have the Joker. Though Bale's fighting approach was more methodical, Ledger's was a lot more improvisational, in keeping with his chaotic character. Interesting. It said Heath let his emotions drive the fighting. He would deliver kicks and blows whenever he wanted, as opposed to being when he was told to. He said, in a straight fight, Batman would beat the Joker every time. But the Joker is a clever, erratic, quirky fighter who uses his street knowledge to give himself a fighting chance. And he loves a knife. Here's a famous comic book section of Bane breaking Batman's back over his knee. Batman number 497 from 1993. Look at that. Heath Ledger performed the Joker's fall from the Pruitt building himself, wearing a harness attached by a wire to a descender rig. The actor was dropped 110 feet. I'm impressed. I wouldn't have done that. And then here, that's how you get the wind effect, just in the airplane, having a huge fan. In post-production, during which time Nolan and his collaborators attended to editing, sound mixing, and scoring the film, Batman Begins code title changed from The Intimidation Game to Flora's Wedding, like we said. We wanted to make it sound like a romantic comedy, said Emma Thomas, Nolan's wife and producer of the film. And that was actually their daughter's name, but she said, luckily, no one caught on to that. And then here's Nolan with his amazing composer, Hans Zimmer. So I guess I don't know anything about the technicalities of filmmaking, but it says the picture quality is stunning in IMAX because of the size of the screen and the stability of the projector. And because we did all of that testing and prep beforehand, we were fairly confident it was going to work. Yeah, so I guess they shot the whole bank heist prologue to Dark Knight in IMAX, and then they tied it in with the rest of the film. So IMAX is actually much more like Instagram resolution or ratio, and so they actually had to cut the top and bottom off to make it fit a standard ratio, aspect ratio. And then for the music composition, Hans Zimmer teamed up with James Newton Howard, who's done The Sixth Sense, Waterworld, The Fugitive, and interestingly, the Clooney breakout television series, ER. Hans Zimmer has done Gladiator, Pearl Harbor, Black Hawk Down, and The Last Samurai, among others. Here they are working at the console. So they had a live orchestra and added to it with electronics. Speaking of electronics, look at this setup right here. That looks amazing. Wow. And look at that soundboard. It's gonna be there's gotta be 1,000 different knobs right there. And there's the famous Joker sticking his head out the window. Wow, the visual effects. Pretty amazing right here. And we can see the early design model of the full-scale Batcave. Oh, that's this right there. There we go. Gotham. The narrows Gotham City's island slum, home to its criminal underbelly. Nice. It's amazing how they're able to shoot and seamlessly blend in CGI to real cityscapes. And the Batmobile penetrating the waterfall. They used a high-pressure nitrogen catapult to launch a full-scale, driverless version of the tumbler through the waterfall. Stunning. And up here, says, when an experiment with real bats proved ineffective, the animation of digital bats was assigned to the moving picture company. Then down here, Christopher Nolan wields the freeze-dried bat on a stick. Wow, so they're real bats? Oh, to obtain the on-set visual effects lighting reference that would be used during post-production. So they can just look at the reflection of light off the actual bat's skin to give them an idea of what it's going to look like, or what it should look like. And here we have a little bit of worms crawling out of the scarecrow's mouth. They did a really good job of keeping it pretty subtle. They didn't go overboard, and it was a lot more believable, to me at least. Here's Gotham City. Gotham City's skyline. And that was really an amazing sequence of him, what do they call it, like flying squirrel suits, doing that maneuver through the actual city, skyscrapers. And then here, is the CGI backdrop. And it's a Double Negative, which is a post-production company, built digital ferries, models based on New York's Staten Island ferries, and composited them into a background shot at Navy Pier in Chicago. And then look at here. And this is a map. Let's get my cup out of the way. Look at this map right here. It says this is an amalgamation of New York, Chicago, and Hong Kong. And they made like an actual legit looking map of Gotham with the Atlantic Ocean to the south, with the River Liberty flowing out through it. pretty amazing. And then one last little extra effect. Is this explosion right here. Is a practical effect, composited, I guess is the word, what they use, into a real shot, I think. And this is the cutout. This is a miniature pyrotechnics were detonated to blow up the corner of the building. Pretty cool. And then here's how they did the well. And then here they're talking about the marketing aspect. Yeah, all these posters were actually pretty awesome. He said he knew it would be hard to market to the mass audience and the die-hard Batman fans. Tapping into the zeitgeist in a whole new way and riding on the wave of exploding social media. Such a new wave marketing ideas were less forthcoming for Batman Begins, which came out before Facebook and Twitter had made a big stamp on culture. They said Batman Begins was actually a bit of a gamble. And they didn't know if it was going to pay off, but it did. It not only was big at the box office, but it also crossed a particular Rubicon, earning a positive reaction from both the fans and mass appeal. Let's see. I think the goodwill we got from the fans was a product of the realization that we were striving to make the best possible film, in that we took the characters seriously. It is true, like at least the George Clooney versions of Batman, George Clooney and Val Kilmer versions were very much like sarcastic and had really unoriginal humor, and they were very lighthearted overall. Because, we can't, of course you'd be hard-pressed to stay on both hands, to stay under 10 if you were trying to count the number of awkward and cringy jokes that Arnold Schwarzenegger cracked. Just his role as Iceman. Yeah, it looks like the campaigns for the movie were really widespread and successful and somewhat grassroots. Not entirely, but they definitely piggybacked on the 2008 election between Obama and, was it Romney, I think? Or was that McCain? It might have been McCain. And, yeah, I believe in HarveyDent.com, WhySoSerious.com, the Ha 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 Times.com. Yeah, of course, the Joker was the biggest draw to Batman, to the Dark Knight, rather. I would definitely say, at least. Marketing strategies for the Dark Knight were inspired in large measure by Heath Ledger's singular take on the Joker, as shown by the poster art above, but images were also developed to reflect the film's modernist style. And Christopher Nolan's conceptual departure from Batman Begins. That's pretty cool. So, the afterwords, Charisma as Natural as Gravity, by Christopher Nolan. One night, as I'm standing on LaSalle Street in Chicago, trying to line up a shot for the Dark Knight, a production assistant skateboards into my line of sight. Silently I cursed the moment that Heath first skated onto our set in full character makeup. I'd fretted about the reaction of Batman fans to a skateboarding Joker, but the actual result was a proliferation of skateboarders among the younger crew members. Skateboards. If you'd asked those kids why they had chosen to bring their boards to work, they would have answered honestly that they didn't know. That's real charisma. As invisible and natural as gravity. That's what Heath had. Heath was bursting with creativity. It was in his every gesture. He once told me he liked to wait between jobs until he was creatively hungry. Until he needed it again. He brought that attitude onto our set every day. There aren't many actors who can make you feel ashamed of how often you complain about doing the best job in the world. And Heath was one of them. One time he and another actor were shooting a complex scene. We had 2 days to shoot it, and at the end of the first day, they'd really found something, and Heath was worried that he might not have it if we stopped. He wanted to carry on and finish. It's tough to ask the crew to work late when we all know there's plenty of time to finish the next day. But everyone seemed to understand that Heath had something special that we had to capture before it disappeared. Months later I learned that as Heath left the set that night, he quietly thanked each crew member for working late. Quietly, not trying to make a point, just grateful for the chance to create that they had given him. Those nights on the streets of Chicago were filled with stunts, These can be boring times for actors, but Heath was fascinated, eagerly accepting our invitation to ride in the camera car as we chase vehicles through movie traffic. Not just for the thrill of the ride, but to be a part of it, of everything. He brought his laptop along in the car, and we had a high-speed screening of 2 of his works in progress. Short films he'd made that were exciting and haunting. Their exuberance made me feel jaded and leaden. I've never felt as old as I did watching Heath explore his talents. That night I made him an offer, knowing he wouldn't take me up on it, but that he should feel free to come by the set when he had a night off, so he could see what we're up to. When you get into the edit suite after shooting a movie, you feel a responsibility to an actor who has trusted you. And Heath gave us everything. As we started my cut, I would wonder about each take we chose, each trim we made. I would visualize the screening where we'd have to show him the finished film, sitting 3 or 4 rows behind him, watching the movements of his head for clues to what he was thinking about. Now that screening will never be real, I see him every day in my edit suite. I study his face, his voice, and I miss him terribly. Back on LaSalle Street, I turn to my assistant director, and I tell him to clear the skateboarding kid out of my line of sight when I realize it's Heath, woolly hat pulled low over his eyes, here on his night off to take me up on my offer. I can't help but smile. Thanks for watching, guys. Sleep well. I'll see you next time.